died at that time?
No.
I should think you haven't.
That's right.
What would you do with the sexual part?
That was in.
One was painted, they said.
Oh, that one, when they died, yeah. And, I just put the tape over it. Is everything right,
How did you start?
Like I say, might be 4 years. So there's a bunch of photographers from the newspaper. Want to take a picture? You want to take a picture? No, it's not yet. Till we get to straighten off.
Would you enjoy it while you were doing it?
That's the worst part of it. I really didn't then. I knew better, restless.
When you dig these graves up, you were kind of in a haze too, is that it?
That's what I could do. Just, how you do it.
And then one time you said you were trying to realize what you were doing and you covered it up without taking anything.
That's right.
What would you do with the sexual part?
They them in the box, that was in.
And what would you do with the head?
That must have been taken from reading about in these magazines and everything. Taking the flesh off like a headhunter.
Welcome back to Homicide Highway. I'm your host, Kirsty McQueen, and in my episode today, The Real Ed Gein Story, we are going into detail, almost like you were a fly on the wall. This will be as close as you can get to the events that took place by the hands of the monster Ed Gein himself. I will be mentioning details of the events that took place from the man himself and the detectives that questioned Ed Gein. I will settle debates, set speculations right, debunking the stories and myths circulating around the Ed Gein story. The stories from Netflix, and speaking the facts, hopefully, for the very last time about the butcher of Plainfield, Edward Theodore Gein. Throughout history, there has been mountains of debates relating to Ed Gein's brother's death, his relationship to his mother Augusta, what was found in his farmhouse. Throughout history, speculation over speculation. The stories of what happened behind those doors of Ed Gein's farmhouse became something of terror, but the real horror lies within the added stories from the journalists, newspapers, movies, books, TV series, you name it. A lot of fabrication came with Ed Gein's case, and for years I've studied this case inside and out. I have spent the last 3 months digging into the history of the Geins, Ed Gein's crimes, his farmhouse, and getting as much accurate information as possible with evidence. I have the facts of the Geins from the census of ancestry, the facts from the autopsy report of Bernice Worden, from the Goltz funeral home, the facts from Ed Gein's physical and psychological report from the Central State Hospital in which Ed was held, the facts from Ed Gein's summary report from the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory, the evidence of Ed Gein's full confession, not to mention I have the newspaper articles, photos of the locations of Warden's hardware store, as well as the crime scene photos, what it looked like then and what it looks like now, the images of the farmhouse where it once stood and what it looks like now, as well as crime scene photos of the time they arrested Gein, the cemeteries and what they look like now. I have the photos of the distances as well between each location for reference. I have it all. I would like to make one thing clear. I will be showing you via Google Maps the locations, however. If you do decide to visit these locations in passing or for your own personal interest, I can't stress this enough. Please act out of respect for the townsfolk of Plainfield. They didn't ask for a spectacle. They are asking for peace and quiet how it used to be before Ed Gein. If you do decide to visit the hardware store where it was located, or where the Gein's farmhouse was once located, please do what you need to do and move on quietly. Regarding the farmhouse, please do not approach the farmhouse location if a do not trespass is listed. Please respect the rules. Another thing I'd like to mention, if you do go and visit the burial ground of where Gein's plot is, or the Gein's plot is, please leave flowers on the graves of Bernice Worden and Mary Hogan if you can. Please respect their places of rest. If you do decide to leave flowers at the Gein's plot, this has been done many times in the past, you will notice that Ed Gein does not have a headstone. The reason for this was because it was stolen, found in Seattle, returned, and it was chipped away that much the caretaker had to put it in a safe place. I would like to state that during this episode I will be showing crime scene photos relating to Bernice Worden, apologies. However, out of the dignity and respect of her and her family and extended family, I will be blurring certain parts of the images. I will show images of the farmhouse at the time of Ed's arrest and where they searched the property and when they searched the property. I will also share what they found in the farmhouse. To put the record straight, as there are a lot of items that the press, documentaries and movies have added which were fabricated for sensationalism. I don't, however, have any images, as those images were disposed of at the time of Ed Gein's arrest. The reason for this was because photographers went into Ed Gein's home, took photos of all of the evidence of what they found, put it all in storage, and because they didn't obtain a search warrant or obtain these items the correct way, meaning they just took it all, they weren't allowed to use it in a court of law if there would have been a trial, and all were destroyed, or some of it remained in the hands of the Wolomoski brothers' estate who interviewed Ed. I am doing this episode purely out of education purposes and to set the record straight as respectfully as I can, and hopefully this will be the last documentary you will need to see so we can officially put the Ed Gein's case to bed once and for all. Throughout the course of this documentary, I will be showing shots from the Central State Hospital so you can fully read each segment. If this is on a TV screen, please feel free to pause to read, because a few of them there is quite a bit of information to read. However, please feel free to screenshot these images if you're on your mobile phone to read later on or to use in your own research or documentary or social media. And I will state what I am referencing from is all authentic documents. Let's move quickly into a brief description of the parents of Ed Gein, George and Augusta and his brother Henry, so we can get a feel for his growing environment at the time. Ed's father, George Philip Gein, was of Canadian descent, however he was adopted, and his guardian mother, Amelia Herman, was of German descent. According to the 1900 United States Federal Census, George, at the age of 26, just a year before he married Augusta, was listed as a farm labourer. Between 1905 and 1906, George appeared in the La Crosse City Directory, living on Gold Street, working at the Davis, Medary and Platts Company, a leather goods factory located in La Crosse, Wisconsin. By 1907, the same directory shows George still on Gold Street, but now employed by the Chicago, Milwaukee and St. Paul Railroad, working in a tannery as a carpenter and for the La Crosse City Power Plant. 2 years later, in 1909, records showed that he was running a local grocery store called Gein and Lurk Grocery. Then, according to the 1910 United States Federal Census, at the age of 36, George was listed as a retail dealer, described as an ironer and employer. Just a year later, in 1911, he was recorded as a clerk on Caledonia Street, and Augusta, interestingly, was listed as a grocer. By 1913, George had moved on again, this time working as a fireman at the La Crosse Gas Company, and then, according to the 1920 federal census, at the age of 47, he was working as a farmer. Now, there's a little confusion in some reports about George's death, but according to my research and verified records, George Philip Gein passed away of a heart condition on April the 1st, 1940. It was claimed by Ed at the Central State Hospital that his father, George, drank excessively and would abuse both him and his brother Henry. Now, we move on to Augusta, Ed's mother, the name we will never forget. Augusta Wilhelmine Lurk was born on the 21st of July, 1878 in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Her father, Frederick, was of Polish descent and her mother, Amalie, was of German descent. Through her years, she was mostly a homemaker, also known as a grocer, working at the Gein and Lurk grocery. According to Ed at the Central State Hospital, Augusta was described as the dominant parent who handled family decisions and, at times, managed the farm work. She was very thrifty, hard-working, and moralistic, was a very religious woman, and according to him, she was good in every way. Also, according to Ed, he had been instructed by his mother that women in general were tainted with evil and should be shunned as much as possible, that through her teachings Ed developed a rigid moralistic attitude regarding women and the use of alcohol beverages. She suffered 2 strokes, one after the death of her son Henry. A probable cause was heartbreak of the death of her son, and another a year after, which proved fatal as she died in the hospital on the 29th of December 1945 at the age of 67. Regarding Ed's brother Henry, at the age of 19 in 1920, according to the 1920 United States Federal Census, he was listed as a laborer in the industry general farm. By 1940, at the age of 39, it was said he completed college in the 2nd year, and according to the 1940 United States Census, he was listed as an operator in the industry farm. In 1942, at the age of 41, there was a World War II draft card for young men which was filled out. They were both treated equally well by the parents and adjusted well to each other, except for the usual arguments that brothers always have. Henry worked away from the farm much of the time, and on one occasion was a foreman for a farmer who hired Jamaicans. Ed wanted to help his brother put out a marsh fire on the farm, but couldn't find him. He got a search party, and when they all returned, Ed went right where Henry was found. It was said Henry was overcome by smoke or a heart attack. Henry George Gein died on the 16th of May 1944 at the age of 43. Now we've had a clearer picture of the family and surroundings, a brief introduction to the world Ed Gein was a part of. Now the moment we've been waiting for. Edward Theodore Gein. Edward Theodore Gein was born on the 27th of August 1906 in La Crosse, Wisconsin. It wasn't until 1919, at the age of 13 years old, that Ed moved to Plainfield with his parents and brother. But during those years at a country school, it's said that he completed the 8th grade and got along well with his classmates. Now he joined them in recreational and social activities when time could be spared from the work and the farm work, I suppose. After the completion of school, he remained on the family farm. Now, after leaving school, Ed did odd jobs, farm work and babysitting. Ed did disclose information regarding 5 neighbours briefly a few times, stating that they were constantly taking advantage of him and that they all owed him money. He said that many of them didn't appreciate the things that he did for them. He did also disclose that he did sell a portion of his land to a neighbour, and the neighbour did pay $10 a year for the first year but failed to pay the rest. He denied that he had any difficulty with the people in Plainfield, although he said many of them didn't appreciate the things he did for them. According to the United States World War II draft card for young men between 1940 and 1947 was for Augusta Gein with Ed Gein's name. A little side note, when I go into the version of events which occurred after the death of Ed Gein's mother Augusta, I am referencing what unfolded according to what was stated by Ed himself in the hospital in which Ed was held for his 30-day observation, just in case you hear me mentioning Central State Hospital. Now, following the death of his mother Augusta in 1945, it was claimed by the Central State Hospital that he was very depressed for about 2 years, and it was during this time that the farm fell into disrepair. He had spells of the blues, and he wanted to sell the farm because of all of the unpleasant memories connected with it. He made some half-hearted attempts to sell the farm and stated that he planned to visit some of his relatives and to eventually settle down in the southern part of the United States with the money he obtained from the sale of the farm. With respect to his claims of memory defects, he says that his lapses of memory started after the death of his mother. Ed also claims that he wished he could have had more contact with other people. Since the death of his mother, he has had the feeling that things around him were unreal, and at one time, shortly after the death of his mother, he felt that he could raise people from the dead by willpower. He also stated that he heard his mother talking to him on several occasions for about a year after she died. His mother's voice was heard while he fell asleep. He has also had dreams that his mother was with him on occasion. Now let's move on to Ed Gein's side of events of his first known admitted murder of Bernice Worden. It was the morning of Saturday, November the 16th, 1957. After completing his breakfast at home, he drove his car to Plainfield to purchase some automobile antifreeze and kerosene around 9 a.m. He noted that it had stopped raining shortly before. Ed drove his Ford to Plainfield to Ellis gas station. He purchased a jug of kerosene, and then he went to the Worden store to buy some antifreeze. Ed stated that he and Mrs. Worden were the only persons in the store. He purchased a half-gallon of permanent type antifreeze in a glass gallon that he had brought along for the purpose. He gave her $1 and alleged that Mrs. Worden gave him a cent in change. Ed said that he conversed with Mrs. Worden and that the discussion was primarily about Deer Check Station across from her store. It was said overall from the entire interrogation, and Ed explaining walking over to Bernice Worden's hardware store to see if they had any rifles, deer rifles, and there weren't any there. There were just some .410 shotguns, 22 rifles, and these light-action rifles. Ed then couldn't remember what happened after, but after the detectives questioned Ed about Bernice Worden being struck over the head by stating, "So that you know, and in addition to being struck or being hit with an object, she also was shot." Ed responded, "Well, see, I couldn't swear to that. You know that ain't clear to me, except the way it has been told that there was blood there." Ed took one from the rack, found he had a .22 caliber bullet in his pocket, placed it in the gun and shot Mrs. Worden in the head. The bullet apparently passed through her skull. He then walked over to her and pulled her body into the back room where it would not be visible from the street. At this time he declared he was nervous, agitated, and did not think clearly, but put the body of Mrs. Worden in her truck, which was standing in the back of the store, drove it some distance, abandoned the truck, walked back to the town of Plainfield, got his car, drove to the truck and put the body in his car. The body was then taken by him to his home and, according to Bernice Worden's autopsy report, was strung up by the feet, disemboweled and mutilated. Now, he claimed during nearly the whole questioning that his last recollection he had of being with Mrs. Worden was in her store, and that Mrs. Worden was standing facing close to one of the front windows looking out towards the Deer Check station, and that he was standing many feet to the rear of Mrs. Worden, that from that point on he had a blackout, i.e. could not remember events from that point on. Ed then alleged his first recollection was driving home in his car, and that later that afternoon he worked on his truck, that in the late afternoon he went to the Leicester Hill farm and had supper consisting of one pork chop, some macaroni, a cookie and coffee. He explained he had gone to the hills to install a battery for them. Ed later did recall seeing Mrs. Worden suspended from the chain hoist in his shed, and also recall putting her vagina vulva in a box that contained other vulvas. By stating he was able to significantly refresh his memory to the extent that he did recall seeing Mrs. Worden suspended from the chain hoist in his shed, but disclaiming knowledge or commission of the act other than reported by his implied admission. Gein further admitted that he recalled putting her vagina in a box that contained other vulvas, but denied knowledge or recollection of its removal from Mrs. Worden's body. There is much speculation as to who found the Worden store closed, who found the blood on the floor, whether they arrested Ed at a grocery store or his own farmhouse. It is not known who found the store closed or saw the blood on the floor. A lot of people claim, and a lot of documentaries claim, that it was Bernice Worden's son, Sheriff Worden, who went to check on her in the afternoon, saw the blood on the floor and saw a receipt with Ed Gein's name next to the cash register. Now, I will say that I have checked every page and read every sentence from the Central State Hospital 30-day evaluation records, the police records and his interview, and nothing was mentioned who went to the store and who's found the blood. These documents contains all of what I've just talked about and more, but not what I've just mentioned about finding the blood or finding, the store empty. Now, as far as I'm concerned, from what I've been reading, I don't think anybody knows what happened at that moment. I am assuming it was documented but got destroyed along with the other items. Now, a lot of people did mention in documentaries and books, TV series, movies, you name it, that there was a receipt with Ed Gein's name on it that was signed for antifreeze next to the cash register. However, from my research, what we do know for sure is Ed did take the cash register, but nothing was mentioned about any receipt, like I said, that had his name on it, and especially not for antifreeze. So this whole, it was found next to the cash register, there was a receipt, none of that existed. And the cash register wasn't even there because Ed took it to his barn. So yeah, so that is a little bit of a debunk right there. So where was Ed arrested? And verified from the official records, he was arrested from the Leicester Hill farm where they actually arrested him and they took him in for questioning. Now, like I said, a lot of people said that they didn't know where he got arrested. Some people said he actually got arrested at a grocery store and they took him back to the farm. However, that is not true. As I've stated just a minute ago, he was at the Leicester Hill farm having some food, and that's where they arrested him. Now, Ed Gein was questioned several different times in the first few days after his arrest on November the 16th, 1957. The questioning was done by Joseph Wilimowski of the Wisconsin State Crime Lab. Originally, this was taped on reel-to-reel audio tape, then would be transcribed from those recordings. It was not known what happened to those recordings over the years. However, there was a portion of audio in which I found which could be heard at the beginning of this episode, and Charlie Hunnam, who played Ed Gein in the Netflix series, found the whole recording so he could accurately speak like Ed Gein himself. The dialogue can be heard and very hard to follow at times, as the transcriber could not understand what was being said, probably due to Ed's low voice. Also, Mr. Gein seemed to be somewhat incoherent throughout questioning, and many of his answers didn't seem to make sense. They seemed to ramble on. My overall theory about this is because of his mind and how distorted it become. Overall, it is quite interesting material and sheds light on many facts not readily known by most. Now, a letter from the Wisconsin State Lab. It was said as follows. Gein, during the course of his investigation at the jail, was generally cooperative. Nonetheless, the majority of his replies to relevant questions were calculated, guarded, and evasive. Gein denied undisclosed knowledge, participation, and/or commission of the Crezo instant case. Now, Gein persisted in giving implied, tacit admission of his guilt as outlined, although in the concluding phase of the interrogation at the county jail, he alleged he was able to significantly refresh his memory to the extent that he did recall seeing Mrs. Worden suspended from the chain hoist in his shed, but disclaiming knowledge or commission of the act other than reported by his implied admission. I will put up the rest of the letter so you can read it yourself, or screenshot this on your phone so you can read it at a later date. When it comes to the autopsy of Mrs. Bernice Worden, I will mention the summary of this report from Gold's Funeral Home in Plainfield, Wisconsin. And this was assisted by Mr. Alan Wilimowski, Firearms Identification Specialist Mr. James E. Halligan. But a warning before we continue, I will be sharing the images of how they found her body, but I will be blurring certain parts as I want to respect her dignity as much as possible. I'm going to count down from 5 because this is where I'm going to show the crime scene images of Bernice Worden. So this is your time now to either flip through this video if you don't want to see these images. Just a heads up, they are pretty graphic, but I want to express to you exactly how they found her, to be completely transparent with my listeners or viewers. So with that being said, I'm going to count down from 5, and you can either pause it and move it on, or you can stop this video and come back to a later date when you are ready to see these images, if you do want to see them. So with that being said, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I won't be going into depth about her autopsy report. However, I will state and show the general information and summary. Here is what was said in the general information section of the report. The body of a murdered and mutilated woman, Mrs. Bernice Worden, has been found in the woodshed of the Old Gein farmhouse near Plainfield, Wisconsin. Investigation which had led to this discovery has been started in the hardware store owned and operated by Mrs. Worden, where an incompletely wiped pool of blood had been found. Further observation had led to the belief that the body had been dragged through the store, loaded upon a truck, then transferred to a private car in which the body had allegedly been brought to the place where it was discovered. The body had been found hanging by the heels from the roof bars, decapitated and eviscerated. Head and viscera had been found in the same location, the vulva in a box, the heart in a plastic bag. Before performing the autopsy, the above-mentioned locations were visited. According to the autopsy, the body of Mrs. Worden had been decapitated at shoulder level by a smooth, circular cut which severed skin. There was no evidence of jagged edges, indicating no axe or simpler implement had been used. The summary and conclusion stated, examination of the decapitated and eviscerated body of Mrs. Worden revealed, as the only cause of death, a bullet-shot wound in the head which had been fired in the back of the head. The bullet had penetrated the brain, causing destruction of vital areas and hemorrhage, as well as exclusive skull fracture and some hemorrhage. The bullet had lodged into the left orbit. It had apparently not been a contact nor a very close shot. The other head trauma had occurred while the blood had still circulated. Death had apparently occurred very shortly, seconds or minutes after the shot had been fired. All the other mutilations of the body had been carried out after death. It is also mentioned that Ed did attempt to having intercourse with Mrs. Worden. However, Ed responded by stating, "I believe I did try, but without success." Now moving on to Mary Hogan, it was said that the detective who was questioning Ed at the time asked a police officer or fellow detective and said Mrs. Hogan disappeared sometime between 4 p.m. and 5:30 p.m. That was in the late afternoon on December the 8th, and at the time was, of course, that can't be absolutely accurate. 10 minutes to 5:30, see a neighbour come to the tavern about 5:30 and found the door unlocked. The lights were turned on and a trail of blood leading from the overturned chair and so on. I found a .32 automatic pistol cartridge case was also found on the floor, but now in view of the information that you have at hand, has your memory been refreshed on any of that? To which Ed responded, which I can't seem to recall, but apparently it did happen. Then Ed remembered Mary Hogan, and there was a report of a little girl passing by. The detectives didn't know whether she was a neighbour or was a neighbour of Mary Hogan's. That recalled a pickup truck, recalled a canvas or tarpaulin in the back of the truck covering something. So this must have been a report of someone seeing Ed's truck outside Mary Hogan's tavern and maybe, just maybe, thinking Mary was under this or something was underneath this covering. Ed admitted to using the .32 automatic pistol on Mary Hogan, so he shot her just like Bernice Worden. According to Ed, after he shot Mary Hogan, he went outside. Whether he wanted to go home, he wasn't quite sure. He states anyway, "I remember going out and I believe I left the door open. And I went back in again and took her. She was laying on her side. It must have been because I didn't have to raise her up. I just took her." Then afterwards, he stated, "I'm sure this is right as it comes to me, that I had no intention even then, but I just took it out that way. And I still can't understand it, why I shot her. Just, I took it out like, whether I was going to show it." It was said that Ed had dressed her out and peeled off the skin of her skull, getting my words tongue-tied, and disposed of the bone and the other material that was in the head. So, that was part 1 for the true story of Ed Gein. In part 2, I will be sharing other relevant shots from Ed Gein's interview from his own mouth. I will be discussing what they found in his house. And I also want to show you what Bernice Worden's hardware store looked like then and the crime scene photo and what it looks like today, same as Ed Gein's farmhouse. I will be debunking various statements that the media has sensationalized, and I will be going over briefly what the Netflix series, The Ed Gein Story, got wrong and what actually happened, or debunking their claims. So stay tuned for that one. If you enjoyed part one, please give me a like, a follow. If you like my video, the algorithm, will know that people are liking my videos. So, it pushes my videos out to a broader audience. And I really hope this happens because I've spent 3 months working on this documentary and getting all of my facts right to back up what I'm saying. This has been a drooling 3 months, but I finally got there. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did making this video to get the truth out there. Now, if you have any questions relating to his interview, in his own words, the autopsy from Bernice Worden, the Central State Hospital in which Ed Gein stayed for first his 30-day evaluation and then afterwards, please don't hesitate to ask me in the comments. Please share your thoughts about this case and I would love to hear from you. Please share it with all your friends and family, and for anyone who has had their information wrong and you gently want to let them know that their information is wrong, and you would like them to know about my video, then please do all you can to get this documentary to a wider audience. I highly, highly appreciate that, and I'm very grateful for that. But until next time, it will be the second part to this documentary will be released in, I'm going to say tomorrow night. However, it might be 2 days' time. I'm going to say 2 days' time just so I can secure myself with this video so I don't upset anybody if it's not up in time. But thank you so much for listening and I will catch you on the next one. Bye.